All right. So in the last class, we have talked about the basics of the data warehouse. So what is meant by data warehouse? It's nothing but, yeah. So data warehouse is nothing but, it's a relational database management system, which is specifically designed for analyzing the business operations, in order to achieve the business goals. So this is what we understood in the last session, right? Now, in order to load the data into the data warehouse, we basically use the ETL process. So what is meant by ETL process? It's nothing but the data from the source. The data from the source will be extracted, okay, and transformed into the required business format and loaded into the target. So this is what you call it as the ETL process. Now, how do you perform this ETL process? That by using the ETL tools. Like we have certain ETL tools in the market, like Informatica Power Center, Data Stage, SSIS, Ab initio, Talent. So these are all the different ETL tools that we have. And using these ETL tools, the ETL process will be basically created. Now, once the data is loaded into the data warehouse, we have certain BA tools are there. These BA tools are responsible for creating the reports or dashboards. Like we have Cognos, SAP, Business Objects, ClickView, Tableau, etc. Okay, so this is what we have studied in the last session. Now, when it comes to the ETL process, what exactly it is? The ETL process is nothing but the data that is present in the source system, the data present in the source system is extracted, transformed to the required business format, and loaded to the target. Basically loaded to the target. Now, in order to perform this ETL process, we already understood there are three things here. One is the data extraction, data transformation, and data loading. So this process is also called as data acquisition. So we are basically we are collecting the data. We are collecting the data into the data warehouse, and these are the three things that we have to do in order to perform it. Now, for performing this ETL process, you certainly require a source, you require a target, and you require the transformation. But this transformation is something optional in nature. Means when you're going with the ETL process, you require the source in order to read the data or in order to extract the data, and you require the target in order to load the data. But transformation is something optional, which means you might transform the data, you might not transform the data. So that is something optional in nature. Okay, so you require the source definition, you require the target definition, and the transformation is something which is optional. Now, in order to perform this ETL process, we extract the data from the source definition, we transform the data according to the transformation, and load the data into the target definition. Now, when you're reading the data or when you are extracting the data, there are two types of extractions. One is you have something called as the initial extract, and you have something called as incremental extract. Initial extract and incremental extract. So initial extract is nothing but if you are reading the data completely from your source, then it is called as a initial extract. Incremental extract, in the sense, it's all often called as CDC, change data capture, which is nothing but reading only the changed data. Reading only the changed data is called as incremental extract. For example, so you have the source, okay, and you have the target, On the day one, let's assume you have like 1 million records are there. So you read all the 1 million records into the target. So all the 1 million records are processed. Okay. Now, since you see here, for the first time, you're just reading the complete data. It is called as initial extract. Initial extract. Now, on day two, another, let's assume another 5 millions are added. So totally you have 1.5 million. Now, since already 1 million is added to the target, then what you do, whatever newly changed data that this 500,000 records, whichever is added to your source, only those records has to be extracted. So this is called as a incremental extract. Incremental extract is nothing but you're basically you're doing something after the initial extract. You are extracting something after the initial extract. This is called as an incremental extract. Incremental extract is nothing but reading only the changed data or the newly added data. Initial extract is nothing but reading the data completely. Okay. Now this is what you call it as a data extraction. So you have two types: initial extract and incremental extract. So most of the time you just read the data, incrementally. For the first time you do the initial extract, and for the second time onwards you just read the incremental data which is added to your source. So whatever data that is added, we have to transform the data, and this is what you call it as a transformation. Now, when you're doing this transformation, there are different ways of transforming the data. Like you can say, like data transformation could be data scrubbing. Data scrubbing, it could be data aggregation, it could be data merging, it could be data, what else? It could be data cleansing. So you have different forms of data transformations for that. So data scrubbing is nothing but adding the new attributes. For example, let's say you have something called as order data is there. Order data contains order ID, let's assume quantity, and price, let's assume. Now in the target I require order ID, I require the sales. So what is meant by sales? Sales is nothing but quantity into price. Quantity into whatever. So you have to add some formula here. So in order to add the formula, what you need to do is that at the time of transforming the data, you will create a new column called as a sales, and you give the formula here. You do the calculation. So this calculation is what you call it as a data scrubbing. So any calculation is called as a data scrubbing operation. And you have data aggregation. So aggregation is nothing but using the summary functions. You have certain summary functions like sum, average, minimum, maximum. So these are all the different aggregate functions are there. Now what you need to understand here is that when you're loading the data into the data warehouse, you always aggregate the data. And load it. Means you might load the data with okay, and then you do the merging. See, it's not like you do all the things, but any kind of data transformation technique can be applied. Okay, it can be applied. You can transform the data in any of the possible way. So it can be data scrubbing, it can be aggregating the data, it can be merging the data. Merging is nothing but joining the data from two different sources, and it can be cleansing the data. It can be like removing the duplicates or suppressing the duplicates. It could be like removing the null data or missing data. So all these things comes under the data cleansing operation. So once the data is transformed, then you load the data into the target, which is a data loading option. So what you do, you read the data from the source definition, you load the data into the target definition, and the transformation is something which is optional in nature, but you have to transform the data based on the requirement. Okay, now In the Power Center, the main core part of the Power Center is understanding how the transformation works. So if you go into the designer, so designer is the place where you have a lot of transformations, and you can do a lot of, you can perform the lot of ETL creation here. Lot of ETL creation here. You can see that here. You can see that. So these are all the different transformations that you have. These are all the different transformations. So you have to observe here is that all the transformations that you see here, these are optional. Means when you create a particular job, or when you create a particular mapping, mapping is nothing but it's a ETL process. See here, when you're doing a particular ETL, here there are no transformations. So we have the source definition. This is the source definition which you are reading the data from, and you have, this is the target definition where you are loading the data. So you're reading the data here and you're loading the data here, extracting the data and loading the data. So this is how it exactly works. Okay, right? So this is what you call it as source definition and the target definition. Here you did not use any transformation. Okay, so based on the requirement, the transformation has to be used. So this is how the ETL process basically works. But when it comes to the data warehouse architecture, so last class what we have seen, we have directly seen, like we have the source system, multiple source systems are present. Okay, right? We are directly integrating the data into the data warehouse. So this is what we have seen in the last session. But when it comes to the real time, you do not integrate the data directly into the warehouse. No, you do not do like that. You have multiple phases in between. You have multiple phases in between the source and the data warehouse. Multiple phases are there. So those necessary phases are really important to understand. So the first phase that comes into the picture when you look into the data warehouse architecture, or when you go into the real-time architecture, is something called as staging area. You have something called as a staging area here. So what is meant by staging area? So staging area is nothing but it is a place where you park the data. Park the data means it's a kind of parking region. It's a kind of parking region where when the source data is available here, you'll bring the data from the source into the staging area. So staging area is nothing but it is a place where you store the raw data. Okay, so this is nothing but it could be a schema or it could be a database. It could be a schema or it could be a database where all the staging tables are present. Okay, this is the place where all the staging tables are present. Okay, right? Now within the staging tables, what we do is that we keep all the raw data from the source system. Okay, and we always load the incremental data. Once we do the normal loading, you load the incremental data into here. Okay, right? So this is how the first stage goes. So the staging area is something which cannot be avoided when you are designing the data warehouse architecture. So by using Informatica Power Center here, you create a lot of mappings. And you load the data into the first stage called as a staging area. You just extract the data and load the data by using the Informatica Power Center. Okay, you extract the data and load the data into the staging area or staging tables, and you always load the incremental data into the staging area. And when you're loading this incremental data into the staging area, you So this is how the staging area works. So staging area is always very important in the data warehousing. Why? Because see, it is something used to keep the park. It is something used to park the raw data. Means you do not use any transformation here. Whatever data that we have it in the source system, you just extract it and load it into the staging area. Okay, so that is how it works. Are we clear so far? Are we clear on this? Are we clear on this? Any questions? Yes? Yes, Shiva, any questions? Prabhu, Bipin, Aishwarya?
I don't have any questions, Venkat.
Okay. Yeah, Prabhu, Aishwarya? I can't hear you, Aishwarya. Maybe please ping your message if you have any questions. Mm-hmm. Before truncation, okay. See, basically what happens is, for example, let's assume, uh, why do we truncate the data? So this is what your question, right? Okay. See, as I told you, let's assume on day one, we have 1 million records are there. Okay. So what do? We load this 1 million records into the staging area. Okay. So from the staging area, let's assume we are loading into the warehouse. Okay. All the data is loaded. On the day two, again 1,050,000, whatever, 5,000 records are added. Whatever records which are added here, totally you have 1,005,000 records. And what we need to do, we need to extract only the 5,000 records from the source. So that is what you call it as a incremental data. Okay. Now, when I'm loading the 5,000 records into the target, which is my staging tables, existing 1 million records has to be deleted. Why? Because if I keep this 1 million records, again it will be 1.5 million. I don't want to process the whole set of records again into the warehouse. I don't want to process the whole set of data because the previous records are already processed into the target. They are already processed. Here, you just maintain the current data. Current data in the sense, one day data only will be there in the staging area. You can just remove it because the history is already present in the warehouse. So what will you do? You have to remove the 1 million records which are already present here so that only newly added 5,000 records will be there, which will be processed into the warehouse. So in order to remove the previous records which are present here, you have to always truncate the data. So truncate, how do you truncate the data? See, if you go to Power Center, okay, if you go to Power Center, for every ETL that you create, you need to create a task called as a session. So this is what you call it as a session. Now this is the target. You can see this is your target. Your target, when you're loading the data into the target, what we are going to do is that truncate target table. See here, truncate target table option, we have checked it. Why did we check it? Because I want to truncate the data in the staging area. I want to truncate the data in the staging area. Why? Because when I'm loading the incremental data, when I'm basically loading the incremental data, I wanted to just to delete the existing information in that. So that's the reason I'm truncating it. Okay, are we clear on this? Are we clear? Yes, so that's how it works. Okay, right. Now, as the first area, as I told you, once the data is loaded into the staging area by using Informatica Power Center, the next stage that comes into the picture is that you have something called as, you have something called as ODS region or ODS area. So what is meant by ODS area? ODS region is the place where you always maintain the current detailed data here. Current detailed data means the last 60 days or the last 90 days of data will be present here. It will be maintained here. The history of last 60 days or the history of last 90 days data will be present here. So what kind of data it is? Current detailed data. Current value detailed data will be present here. Now, in order to see, again, this ODS area is also a separate schema, or it could be a separate database where here all the ODS tables will be present. In order to load the data into these ODS tables, again, we have to basically use Informatica Power Center here and create the ETL. So see, when you're creating the ETLs here, you just have to make use of different transformations to transform the data and load the data from the staging area into the ODS. So now your source is your staging area and your target is ODS area. In the first phase, source systems is your source. Okay, client source system, wherever the client is storing the data, that will be your source. It could be a flat file, it could be a relational table, or it could be SAP, or it could be mainframes. That is your source, and your target is staging area. This is your first phase. In the second phase, what is your source? Staging is your source, and your target is ODS region, where you wanted to store the current value detailed data for the last 60 or 90 days. So once the data is loaded to the ODS region, as I told you, ODS region contains the last 60 to 90 days of data, and this data is useful for the operational reporting. What this data is useful for? Operational reporting. What is meant by operational reporting? Operational reporting is nothing but whenever you wanted to analyze the current trend, whenever you want to analyze the current trend of your business, basically the ODS region is something used. Current trend, for example, let's say your client has introduced a new product into the market. Now I want to analyze how the product is maintaining in the last 30 days or in the last 60 days. Then what I'll do is that I'll probably want to create a report on it. How can I build a report on it? See, in order to create a report on it, basically I'll make use of the ODS region. I'll basically make use of the ODS region, right? So ODS region, you have the detailed data is present. I'll summarize the data and I'll summarize the data and I'll bring the report and I'll create the report. Current analysis report can be created from it. Okay, so that is the importance of ODS region. So this ODS region is something optional in nature. When I say optional in nature, only based on the client's requirement, these ODS tables will be created. Okay, this ODS area will be designed only based on the client requirement. So if the client does not require any current analysis, data analysis or the current trend analysis, from the staging area, you can directly load into the data warehouse. From the staging area, you can directly load into the data warehouse. So that is what is important here. Okay, right? So yeah, so let's say if we have the ODS area, we load the data from the ODS to the data warehouse. So this data warehouse is also called as OLAP database. OLAP is nothing but online analytical processing system. Online analytical processing system, because you can analyze how your business is running by using the data warehouse. So it is called as OLAP, online analytical processing system. So within this data warehouse or within this OLAP, you have two types of tables are present. One is dimension tables and you have fact tables. Dimension tables and fact tables both are present in the data warehouse. Dimension tables and the fact tables are present. Okay, right? Now, when you're loading the data into the data warehouse, again by using Informatica Power Center, you create a lot of ETLs. And when you're creating the ETLs, you always make sure you aggregate the data. You always make sure you aggregate the data and you load the data into the data warehouse in different levels. Okay, you load the data into the data warehouse at different levels. Means, for example, let's assume if you're loading the sales data into the warehouse, you're loading sales data into the warehouse. This sales data, you keep it at different levels. You keep the data of the sales at the daily level in one table. The same sales data you aggregate at monthly level, and you create and you maintain it a different different table. You aggregate the same data at yearly level, and you keep it in a different table. Okay, so within the data warehouse, the data will be aggregated at different levels, and it will be loaded or it will be stored in the warehouse. So this is how the data warehouse architecture will be there. So even when you're asked in the interview, like how your data warehouse design is present, you have to say like where your source data is present, where your client's data is present, and from there you move the data into the staging area. From the staging area, you move it into the ODS for some subject areas, and from the ODS you load the data into the data warehouse. And also what you need to remember is that within the data warehouse, you keep all the data in a separate tables, which means you store all the sales data in a separate sales tables. Okay, you store all the finance data in the separate finance tables. You store all the marketing data in separate marketing tables. So the data of every subject areas, you have a lot of subject areas for every like the sales, marketing, finance, so a lot of subject areas are there. So for every subject area, you have separate tables will be there where the data will be stored. Okay, so that is about how you have the data warehouse architecture. But sometimes once the data is present in the data warehouse, you normalize the data. Okay, and you keep the, or you normalize the data, or you denormalize the data and store the data from the data warehouse into the data marts. You have something called as a data mart here. So what is meant by data mart? Data mart is nothing but, it's a data mart is nothing but it's a kind of subset of data warehouse. It is a subset of the data warehouse where it is created based on a single subject area. Means, let's say if you have more number of sales reports are there, from the data warehouse I'll create a sales data mart so that it contains only the sales reports, sales data. When you have more number of finance business reports are there, okay, you create the finance data mart and it contains only the finance data. Okay, so why do we have this data mart concept is that, for example, let's assume your data warehouse is very huge, that it contains 5 terabytes of data. 5 terabytes of data is there. At the same time, let's assume you have like a 500 business reports are being created every day on this. When you have such huge amount of data is present, and when you have so many business reports are being created here, basically what will happen is that the performance of that warehouse or the performance of the database will be degraded. So in order to improve the performance of the data warehouse, what is going to do is that we will keep the data into the data marts. We'll separate the data from the data warehouse, and we load the data from the data warehouse into the department specific data marts. Department specific data mart. So what is meant by data mart? A data mart is nothing but it's a subject oriented database which stores the data of a single subject area, and that data mart will be useful for reporting. So this is about how the data mart basically works. So are we clear on this? Any questions? Are we clear so far? Yes, Bipin. Any questions, Bipin? Shiva?
I am clear, Venkat.
Okay, so this is how exactly the data warehouse and the data mart looks. Okay, right. Now there are multiple. Yeah, let me open. Okay, now you can see this is what exactly the data warehouse architecture. So you have different source systems are there, whether it is relational tables or the flat files or the semi-structured sources. So what we do is that we we perform the ETL process and we load the data into the data warehouse. So you can see these are the department specific data marts which are loaded after the data warehouse is loaded with. Okay, and you have different types of reporting tools are there, as we know, like relational OLAP tools. Relational, see, when I say BA tool or when I say OLAP tool, both are same. BA tool and OLAP tool both are same. So these OLAP tools are three types. One is relational OLAP tools, multi-dimensional OLAP tools, as well as hybrid OLAP tools. Okay, relational OLAP tools is nothing but these tools basically they can create the reports from the relational databases. They can create the reports from relational databases. For example, you have something called as SAP Business Objects. This is a relational OLAP tool. Okay, and you have something called as Tableau. It is another relational OLAP tool. And you have something called as multi-dimensional OLAP tool. This is also separate set of, another type of BA tool where using this BA tool, you can create a concept called as cube. You can create a concept called as cube. Cube is nothing but it contains the data. Cube is nothing but the data will be presented in a 3D format. The data will be basically presented in a 3D format like this. Okay, so here you have the data, here you have the data, here the 3D format the data will be present. So these queues will be created by using the MOLAP tools. For example, Cognos is a MOLAP tool. Hyperion is another MOLAP tool. So here you can store the data in the cube. From the cube, you can create the reports. So that is the multi-dimensional OLAP tool. So Cognos is a multi-dimensional OLAP tool as well as Hyperion. Okay, so different types of OLAP tools are again present. Okay, right. Now you can see first of all we do the extraction process. We read the data from different source systems and we load the incremental data always into the first stage, which is called as a data staging area. Okay, so this is the staging area where the raw data will always present. So once the data, see here, so the periodicity of the transmission It could be on a daily level or it could be on a weekly level. Means we do not load every the data every time. It could be on different frequency. It could be on a daily frequency. The data can be loaded on a daily level or it could be on a weekly level. Sometimes it could be on a monthly level. So all the jobs which are created here, okay, they are scheduled in the scheduling tools. All the ETL jobs will be scheduled in the scheduling tools. Like you have UC4 is a scheduling tool, Tidal is a scheduling tool, Autosys. So these are all the different scheduling tools that we have in the market. And what we do is that every ETL job will be scheduled here. Based on the scheduled time, it will be running. Okay, so what I mean to say is that the periodicity of or the frequency of running these jobs, it couldn't be at any frequency. Okay, right. Right now, once the data is present in the staging area, what we do, we transform the data, we cleanse the data, and we load the data into the operational data store, ODS region. So within the ODS region, it contains only the current value detailed data useful for operational reporting. So once the data is loaded to the ODS, you summarize the data and you keep the data at different levels. So the summarizing depends upon the level of summarization of the data warehouse. It could be daily, it could be monthly, it could be weekly, it could be quarterly, it could be yearly. So you can load any kind of data or you can load the data at any level of summarization. Okay, right? And that's how it works. And there are different types of architectures. Like the first one is like virtual data warehouse architecture, where you don't have any data warehouse here. You don't have any data warehouse and you don't have any kind of ETL process. You just create the reports on top of the source systems, and this is called as virtual data warehouse architecture. And the next one is enterprise data warehouse architecture. So here, this is the place where you have only a single database. You have only a single database where the data is present in where the data is present in the warehouse only. Only one database will be there. Within this one database, all the data is present. So you don't have any concept of data mart here. No data mart concept is there. You just load the data in different levels. Again, I mean, you just load the data from source to the staging, from the staging to the ODS, from the ODS to the data warehouse. So all the data of different subject areas will be present here. Sales data is present here, marketing data, finance data, all the different subject areas data will be present in a single database. So this is called as enterprise data warehouse architecture, and most of the projects they follow the same enterprise data warehouse architecture case. Okay, so this will be always followed. And the next one is like multi-tied. You can see this is what we explained just now. So within this multi-tied architecture, once the data is loaded into the warehouse, depending upon the requirement, the data will be again has to be loaded into the department specific data marts. Okay, so you load the data from the data warehouse to the data mart. So depending upon the requirement, as I told you, if the data warehouse contains huge amount of data, at the same time, if it is difficult to perform the reporting on it, then the data mart concept will be coming. Okay, and again the other one is like this is also data mart concept, but here instead of loading the data into the data warehouse, we first load it into the data marts. Okay, yeah, so you create the data marts at different levels. So for example, let's say if you're creating a sales data mart, you first load the data into the sales data mart. After that, you load the data into the finance data mart. After that, you load the data into the marketing data mart. So the data from all the data marts can be, again integrated, and it will be loaded into the enterprise data warehouse. So this is what you call it as a multi-tied data warehouse architecture. So this is how it works. You just create the data marts and you load the data into the data marts first, and then you integrate again into the data warehouse. So that is how the multi-tied data warehouse architecture will basically work. Okay, right. And you can see the data is loaded into the data warehouse at different levels. It could be a highly summarized data, it could be lightly summarized data, and it could be current value data is present. So this is how the data is present here. Okay. All right. So any questions so far? Any questions? Are we clear on this? Are we clear on this data warehouse concept? Yeah, architecture of the data warehouse. Yes, Bipin, Shiva, any questions?
No, I'm good.
All right. Yeah. Okay, then, yeah, that is all for today. Bipin, this is the first session for you?
Yeah, today is my first session, yes.
Okay, so yeah, so what is your background, Bipin? So are you working currently?
Not employed right now, looking to find a job.
Okay, okay, cool. So you're from which background?
Sorry?
I mean, what is your prior IT experience? Do you have any IT experience or?
Yeah, a little bit of QA experience on ETL side.
Oh, great. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. So ETL testing. You're into ETL testing?
Yeah, I've done it before, but currently I want to switch lanes.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So this course is intended to cover three modules specifically. One is the data warehousing, the basics, and then the Informatica Power Center with a case study, with all the real-time applications. At the same time, we'll cover with ETL testing also at the end of the sessions. Okay, so the course is basically divided into three modules. I'm not sure whether you received this document or not, but let me show it. Yeah. Okay. So you can see this is Informatica Power Center. 961 is the version which we are going to see as a part of the training. Okay. Now for the first 2 to 3 days, we'll have like kind of fundamental sessions, theoretical sessions about the data warehouse, how the data warehouse architecture is here, what is the data modeling. So these things will be understood in the first 3 days. So once we are done with that, we'll start with Informatica Power Center. So here you will understand like what is the importance of ETL developer, what is the importance of Informatica Power Center, what is the different features that are available, how the previous versions are different from this. Okay, what is the architecture of it, and then we'll step into the project implementation. So within this project implementation, you will understand like what are the roles and responsibilities of Informatica developer and how to get the requirements. So what are the different documents that will be created. So these things will be understood in the project requirement, and you will understand the tool when you're doing this project. Okay, so it's a case study that we are going to apply, retail case study, and you will understand each transformation in the Power Center with a real-time case. So these are all the different things, these are all the different scenarios that we are going to do as a part of this training, right? And at the end of the sessions, so once the data is loaded to the data warehouse, and then we'll start with how to basically test those ETLs. So that is what you call it as ETL testing, and here the QA part will start. And this is I'll just take for each testing, I'll just take one mapping as your case, and I'll explain how the testing will be done. Okay, so this is about how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and when it comes to the prerequisite, I think since you have already worked in a QA, you should have very good knowledge on SQL and good knowledge on Unix commands, or Unix commands or Unix. Unix, as long as you're good with the basic commands. Okay, anyway, I'll send you the recording of what are the requirements of the Unix. Okay, and what scenarios we basically give the, we basically use the Unix. So all those things I created a, I have covered in a recording, and that recording will be shared with you. So as long as you're comfortable logging into the Unix machine, and understanding how to move from one drive to another drive and the basic Unix commands, that should be enough to, Informatica developer, 90% will work on SQL and the SQL and Power Center. Only 10%. If any such circumstances comes where you cannot do something within Unix, you cannot do something with SQL or Power Center, then you go with the Unix. That is the normal level, not expertise. Informatica admin should have very good Unix knowledge, but not as a developer. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is how it works. Okay. So any questions?
No,
Any
no
questions?
questions.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's all for today, and we'll meet in the tomorrow session, same time. Okay, with the same meeting ID. So we'll talk about how the tables are basically designed. Okay, how the tables, data warehouse tables are basically designed. We'll talk about that in the next class. Okay. All right.
Okay.
So thanks for joining. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.